Afternoon guys, we're back again. I'm going to do a quick video today on pinching and pruning, particularly in regards to fig trees. And I'm sure that you've all seen videos before on pruning and pinching of figs and the reason why we're going to do this, but I was about to pinch a couple of my figs today, so I thought we'd do a video. We would pinch a couple of varieties that are the same variety and see how they respond side by side, so you can see exactly what kind of effect it has on the plant. And we'll also look at some of the prunes that I've done previously. Now, I prune a majority of my plants in winter time, and the reason that I prune my plants is because I want them to remain a fairly nice consistent shape in a pot. I want to keep the main branches on the tree to be starting to develop some nice thickness, so that the further down the stem we get this really nice thick shape, and we can kind of keep to the shape that's a useful shape. Now, this is a plant that I've pruned it several times over the years, so you can see this is a much older prune down here, where this is a prune from last year. But we'll also look at this plant over here, this Violette de Bordeaux again, which I actually didn't prune this year, and you can see how it affects the plant. So it did get its initial prunes the year after it was a cutting, and I pruned this center part out so that it would come out and grow in like a vase-like shape. I want to keep branches from going into the center of the plant. I want to keep light filtering through. But this winter I didn't prune it at all, so you can see that these stems that are on here, there are actually no pruning cuts from last winter, and we can see that as a result of that we have a rather leggy long plant with all of these kind of stems coming off it. And that may or may not be a good thing. Personally, I don't like it. I prefer a more compact tree. These branches can start to get annoying when you're trying to fit them in other places. I might want to keep a tree in a single plane, maybe a plane running this way, and these back branches are kind of pointing out towards the other end of the pot, just going to get in the way. I can't stack the pots together as easy or put them up against a wall. There's a whole bunch of reasons you might want to shape a particular plant. Now, the key things to remember when we're pruning figs or anything is that it's actually really easy. It's not rocket science, and it's very simple. You have a look at the plant, you decide the shape that you want it to be, and you make a pruning cut to an outward facing bud, and it really is that easy. So when I cut this particular branch here in winter time, it was because there was a bud directly under it that was planting outward, so it wasn't going to grow into the center of the plant. It was going to keep the plant growing out here. I didn't want to keep the branches very long, so I also cut my branches back quite significantly. So you can see there's another pruning cut that was done here, with the outward facing bud down the bottom is the one that popped. Again, on this plant here, you can see the cut that was taken here, and the outward bud right below keeps the plant going out that way, and it really helps develop like a compact tree shape. Now, figs will occasionally, like this one has done, they'll either root right at the base of the tree. We can see this one is rooted right at the base, and sometimes they'll sucker from the roots and they'll pop up all over here. Some trees, fig trees, prefer to be trees, and others want to be shrubs that'll have multiple branches coming out of the soil. And so that's really the basis of the pruning. So if we go back to our Violette de Bordeaux and we wanted to prune this back, and you can prune it in summer, but they'll drop a bit of sap. I might take a branch like this one, and I might take it all the way down here, maybe to this bud here. So it's facing outwards. That will then cause this branch to really start to thicken up over the next seasons, and it will cause a new branch to grow out, hopefully that direction. And that will make this tree more compact, more useful, and just over time it'll be a healthier, stronger plant with better scaffolding branches. And that kind of brings us on to pinching. And if we look at a fig tree that's growing, or any real fig tree that's growing, you can see that the plant really wants to grow to a main stem. Typically, we did say there are bush types. This is another one that's sprouted from just below the surface in this case here. But in general, you have a single branch that's going to kind of be the dominating branch in the plant, and that's because there's these hormones that sit in this plant, and they do two things. Number one, they generate all the energy, they direct all the plant growth energy to the top of the stem here. And number two, it suppresses the rest of the plant. So instead of having this bud here popping, and this bud here popping, and this bud here popping, it's all going to go down to just that. The energy is all going to be directed up the top here. If I was, however, to cut this branch off, say here, all of a sudden this little bud here will probably pop out, and maybe some down the stem, because some of that inhibition that's been caused, it's called apical dominance. Some of that inhibition that's been caused from wanting to grow upwards is going to get spread throughout the plants. The inhibition will weaken, and several of those buds will then pop. Now, when you cut that off as well, not only will it cause branching, it'll often cause fruiting a lot earlier. And so I have a couple of figs over here that I was going to do some rubbing of. So just rubbing is just removing that top bud. So if I was to remove this bud here, that would be just called rubbing it off. And I have 4 plants sitting on the table here. These are all that kangaroo plant that I talked about. This is that Kangaroo Island plant, the very vigorous one. And I've chosen this plant number 1 because I have 4 of them. Well, I've actually got a few more, but I've got 4 sitting right here that are all growing quite well. I have 2 that are growing on a central stem. So this one here is growing on a single central stem with no branching. This one here is growing on a single stem without branching. Whilst this plant here has a stem here that branches once and then comes up and branches twice. And this plant here also has 1 branch and then 2 branches. Now I put little labels in here so we can quite easily see which plant is which as they go on. Now the red ones are going to get the chop and the blue ones are not. And we're just going to take off the top buds of these particular plants, and then we're going to see how it affects the plants side by side. We'll compare this one with its single stemmed buddy, and we'll compare this one and this one together so that we can see exactly what happens. Will the red plants fruit a little bit quicker maybe? Will they branch out more? Will they become more vigorous? Now all 3 of these pots, 1, 2, 3 black plots are the same size. This little white pot is slightly smaller, so there might be a slight reduction in vigor because of that, but there's not much I can do about that, unfortunately. That's the size of the plant I've got, and I've got 4 of these. So I'm not actually going to rub them, I'm going to cut them, and I'm going to take the entire top leaf off just to the second leaf here, so just above where the next bud could potentially come. So we're going to take 1 off. And this plant here, this branch here, we're going to take it down to just above this bud just for ease. And this plant here, we'll take it down to this cut here. Now we call it rubbing, even though it's a cut. We're really just removing a single bud on both of those plants. So we'll put the tags on them. We'll keep an eye on these because this is a particularly vigorous variety and it is growing quite quickly. I would expect that we'll have some results fairly soon, and we'll be able to see exactly what the difference is. How did this one that we just did we removed both the apical buds on that one compared to this one that has 2 still on the plant, and how does this single stemmed plant that's had its tip removed compare to the one that is going to have its tip remaining. And we'll see if they end up fruiting differently or growing differently, having different vigor and anything like that. So that's our video for today, guys. I expect we won't have a follow-up on this one for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, but then we'll come back and we'll have a look to see how they go. Until then, catch you all in the next one.